Hello, everybody. I'm Johnny McCobb, the creep of the class. I'm here at Horror News Net TV. I'm here with Scott Glosserman, the man behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Probably one of it's a cult classic horror film. I think a lot of fans of the genre are aware of the film, love the film. Um, I don't think a lot of people are quite as aware that the sequel, this remake, has come out in the form of a comic book. Before The Mask: The Return of Leslie Vernon. The first 3 issues are out now. Have them here. Actually, you said the third one is just about to ship to the backers. And yeah, I just want to talk about that a little bit, see what's going on with that, and what that means for the future of the franchise. So,
well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for being here.
By the way, I didn't realize this was going to be a video conference. So I would have probably done something interesting to the background. Just so you know, this mies en scène is not my particular cup of tea.
That's all right. Yes. So tell me a little bit about the sequel, the remake. Sorry.
It's remake. It's a sequel, prequel, remake mashup. Obviously, we are addressing the conventions and archetypes of horror, and so when addressing a sequel, there are sequels and prequels and remakes, and so we're mashing that all up into one.
Right.
Biting off as much as we can chew. But this was written pretty quickly after Behind the Mask in 2008, 9, 10 around, and so we were talking off camera a little bit. I'm a little self-conscious that some of this is dated. There was no point in keeping this screenplay embargoed. Who knows if we'll ever meet our objective and actually make the film. And so I thought, if anything, let the screenplay speak for itself. If there's some meritocracy left in this business, then at least if I can memorialize, if I can novelize the screenplay in comic book form, not only is it good in the industry now to have something underlying, something derivative that people can point to, but also a comic visually shows people the tone, the feel. It's like a lookbook. It shows the executives and the decision makers where you want to go. We were also talking on camera. I learned the hard way as a student of the literature of film as criticism and film as literature. I studied the conventions and archetypes of film and the story of film, the social commentary, political commentary. And so I'm always a story guy going into these meetings. I've got all my screenplays dog-eared when I'm pitching myself as a director on existing screenplays. And I learned early on, especially going out to Platinum Dunes and the Michael Bay produced Texas Chainsaw remakes and Halloween remake. Those kind of things there's so much more about the look and the tone, how you're going to shoot it. So a lot of the guys coming out of the commercial directing world who've really got a fabulous look, they're in perhaps a better position than someone like me who's really focused more on the story, and maybe the look comes next. So that's, not only is that one of the reasons it's so story and dialogue driven, this movie and these movies, and also since it's a cross-genre horror comedy,
right.
Those are really the 2 biggest reasons why it's been such a challenge to get this movie capitalized. There are always examples. Take Cabin in the Woods, take Get Out. There are always big commercial examples of horror comedies, and yet it's so difficult to really truly get some studio to greenlight a horror comedy. It's got to be a perfect storm of so many great things coming together for a horror comedy to get made. Because marketing departments know how to market in their lanes,
right.
And it's harder to market that cross-genre. So that's why it's been very tough for us.
It's a shame because, I mean, it is in its essence, it's more satire really than straight comedy. I mean, honestly, as far as satire of the slasher genre, I feel that Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon is more important for its analysis of tropes than even Scream. So I mean,
Oh, thank you.
it just goes very very in depth, and I mean that carries over fantastically even into this remake in the form of the comic that still continues, and it's I really love to see that analysis of the genre. It's one of my favorite genres. Now I know that as we were speaking before, you had tried to do a crowdfunding campaign to fund the sequel to the film. You wanted to try to make this into a movie first, and it ended up turning into a comic book. And that's something that I see happen. That's a route that I see a lot of films take sometimes when they can't become a film, they go the comic book route. Like the sequel to Freddy vs. Jason, Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash. They ended up making that into a comic book based off of the screenplay. My own comic book realized, when I wrote that, I realized, this would have a multi-million-dollar budget. I would have no control over this if I actually made this into a film. I ended up looking into other options. So, and like I was saying to you, I mean, it really, the slasher genre fits perfectly in with the comic book medium because slashers, in a way, are almost like the horror movie version of a superhero, which is, the staple of the comic book medium. I mean, they have garish costumes, secret origins. Some of them have special powers. It really fits the mold like to a T.
It's very, very true.
Absolutely.
Very true. In fact, you've hit on something very interesting. So a couple things. I completely agree. And I think for a while, just take a look at the last 10, 15 years. I mean, it got so obvious that people were writing original screenplays and then novelizing those screenplays into comic books so that they could walk into a studio, let's say, with quote unquote underlying material. And people were much more prone to greenlight something that they could point to and say, look, I mean, this was a comic book before, and it obviously has a following, and it had sales. And I just think if there's any way to mitigate risk for somebody putting that much money down on a movie, that person's much more likely to greenlight something. So it became a chess move in the game of getting movies greenlit. But it also led to the proliferation of great comic book material over the last decade or so. But you've touched on something really, really interesting about horror slashers being similar in theme to heroes, to action heroes, and so along those lines, we're peddling a concept that takes place in a world where all of those horror characters exist, right. And so that may live as a comic book series, hopefully a TV series, but I would say the legacy of Leslie Vernon doesn't live or die necessarily with this remake. It may live on in a different iteration per se. Mm-hmm. The screenplay itself that we're novelizing this comic now was written almost 10 years ago and is already a little bit dated, which was, again, another reason why I wanted to get the comic out, because the self-conscious side of me says, even if we do get this made, is it going to feel dated? And so the only addition we made to the comic itself, Nate Milliner, our comic book illustrator, letterer, colorer, I mean, he did everything. He condensed the screenplay. But the only thing we added was a disclaimer at the beginning that homages to Blair Witch, that suggests that this footage was found, because I wanted to make sure that the reader knew that this script and this story lives in the late aughts and not right now. But yeah, that's a very astute observation of yours, and it's one that we feel Leslie Vernon is a vehicle or a catalyst for telling a story in which he lives in a world where all of these horror people exist.
And that's something I really like the idea of, and that's something that's been, there's Easter eggs in all sorts of slasher movies that, it's almost like a conjoined universe. These characters all exist together. I mean, whether it's blatantly stated like Freddy versus Jason, where they actually get to meet up, or the opening scene of Bride of Chucky, where you see all their memorabilia in the lockup. Yeah, I always love those little Easter eggs, and that's fantastic. That's one of the things I loved about your movie is all the references to all the different characters.
Thanks.
So obviously, I'm guessing one of the hopes is that you can almost spin the hopeful success of this comic book series into maybe actually getting the film made.
Yeah, that would be the goal. The journey we took in 2017 was, here's the 10th anniversary of the theatrical release. Jared Neese, the director of South by Southwest, was kind enough to invite us back. I mean, he was an assistant or a programmer back in the day, and now he's running the whole thing. And that was really, really great of him to give us a slot. So we played at the Paramount and at Lamar, and that then kicked off an Indiegogo campaign to fund at least the first 3 issues of the comic, which were totally funded by backers. So thank you very much to the backers. 3rd issue is being sent out this week. And then we'll open up an online store. So the first 3 issues will be able to be purchased commercially. We'll drop ship them to some of the famous comic book stores around the country. And then fortunately, through our awesome Shout Factory deal, where they're releasing the 4K digital up-res version of the film on DVD, and also our license renewal with Shudder. We've got enough money to actually go ahead and just fund issues 4, 5, and 6 that we will probably next week begin pre-selling. So all of that has been an effort to create an economically sustainable way of creating an advertisement, a proof of concept, as it were, for executives to see the sequel and to judge whether or not it should be made into a movie. Now, ever since our failed Kickstarter campaign so long ago in 2010, by the way, caveat to that is we raised the most amount of money of any film ever at the time through crowdfunding. It's just that we set the bar too high, and so we couldn't cash in on that money. But I think we had commitments of up to $220,000, which was the most at the time. So that was such a thrill.
Yeah.
But I'd set a bar of $500 because I had a matching investor. So $500 would have given me $1 million. This go around, 7 years later, with such a bigger crowd-sourced, crowd-funded universe, and also crowdfunding for equity, I think there's a pretty good shot. We might actually be able to run a new crowdfund campaign, maybe a combination of a crowdfund for equity campaign, crowdfund for perks campaign, with the addition of a distributor coming in for a piece of that and some private investments. We're talking to some people. We're seeing if maybe it isn't time to try the whole thing again.
Now, if you did end up being able to adapt it into the film it was supposed to be, would there be any changes to the script, or would you keep it as it is? That's a
great question. Yeah, that's a great question. David Stevie, who's integral in these decisions, and the cast, Nathan and Angela and everybody, Robert, Scott, they all have strong opinions, and we're all in this together. So one school of thought is, let's just do the sequel. Let's do that screenplay. We loved it at the time and still do, but it is a bit dated. Although you seem to think it's not. So maybe it's one of those things, you read a joke and then you love it, and then a year and a half later you've read it 70 times and you hate it. You have to remember what it was like the first time you tasted it. So, but it's possible that script now lives in this comic book form, and that's maybe a bridge from the first one to the second one, which may be entirely new. So I don't know. I think that's a good question, and it's one that we're going to all have to continue to ponder.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, yeah. I really didn't get any sense of datedness from reading it myself. In fact, still found it pretty fresh. I mean, I found that like the tropes that you analyzed are new tropes that just would be brought up, like the slasher's penchant for killing debauchered teens. Well, things like smoking pot aren't considered quite so debaucherous anymore, and it brings up like the question of equal rights as far as killing two gay teens versus two straight teens and things like that. It's a very interesting concepts that you're bringing up, because we're in a different world than like when Scream came out.
No doubt. But remember, that was like a don't ask, don't tell joke.
Right.
That was, to me, that joke is 8 years old. But I suppose it's all still going on now. So it's you're right. And again, if this footage was found footage from Blair Witch style, this was found and this happened at a particular time, as long as you set it in that time and you establish those rules, I think it's okay. But it's also, since we wrote the script, Tropic Thunder came out. Like other meta things happened to make what we're doing not as fresh, I suppose. It's one of those. Maybe we'll just start over and write something completely new and completely different, or maybe we'll do that screenplay. But it really comes down to we're all really ambitious, fun-loving, it's not the word, dedicated artists in the horror genre, and should we be so fortunate to be able to make another one, whether it's this script or something else, you can rest assured that we're going to put our heart and soul into it and probably come up with something pretty good.
Fantastic. So, like, let's say, best case scenario, everything, everyone loves the comic, you're able to get a new movie made. What comes next? Would there be plans for more installments down the road? Would you like to see this become an entire franchise?
Well, when David and I were sitting in a diner in 2003, 2004 talking about this, we always thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if there were these small, tiny little documentaries that were these origin stories of Leslie Vernon. But what if Leslie Vernon just became a huge horror slasher in his own right, and Screen Gems just came out with Leslie Vernon slasher movies, and so they kind of lived separately, and they were normal, straightforward, awesome slasher films, but you could go back and watch those origin meta docs kind of thing. So we always thought about that. Lately, I have been, and I alluded to this earlier, I've been intrigued about the prospects of a series, say something on a Netflix or a Shudder that you could binge, that took place in a universe where everyone exists. I mean, it's very similar to the film itself, but it's in a way, I don't think anybody has tied this whole universe together in the X-Men or DC or Marvel Universe way, in the way that Universal's trying to do it with monster movies and so on and so forth. Through Leslie Vernon, I think there's a vehicle to tie this whole universe together, and to have Leslie meet up with different horror slashers in different episodes, introduce new ones, meet up with old ones, and tie this together. Almost like a and The Office meets Nightmare on Elm Street type of series, and so that is something that we have been working on a little bit and talking to some people around town. Be a little bit tricky to pull off, but I think it would be really, really interesting and a lot more commercial than probably the initial documentary that we started off with. I mean, I think what Cabin in the Woods did is probably the super duper commercial, fun, awesome version of, Behind the Mask. And
Right.
I think in order to make something economically sustainable this go around, you have to make it broader and bigger next time. That's probably what we'll do.
I mean, I could totally see it as some sort of, even if it was like, even if it started out as like one of the, you mentioned like a Netflix series. Even if it started out as like one of those smaller series to start out with, like 6 episodes or something, just to like do the concept, I could totally see that, and I think that would actually work very well as a vehicle for this type of idea. That's
Yeah.
I really like that.
Thanks. Okay. Well, stay tuned. Stay tuned for that one.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank you again for
Sure.
doing this interview. Before I let you go, is there anything else you want to tell the viewers?
Oh man, what a year it's been in horror. I think Get Out has just been a fantastic piece of social commentary, and that's really where I feel the best horror films lie. Even loved Aronofsky's Mother and his take on a horror-ish film, which I thought was really fantastic. Another allegory. Guillermo del Toro, he's a genius. He's pulled off some amazing things. There's just been some really great content this year. I think in previous years, I haven't been so psyched about what I was watching. But I just really love where the genre is going and has gone. And I also, through all of this, I just continue to be just so amazed and gratified at the level of enthusiasm that people still have for Leslie Vernon and for Behind the Mask. And we're so moved and motivated by the fans out there. It's not something we can quantify. We don't know how many fans are out there, but for those of you who are, we're just get up every morning because of you guys. So thank you so much for your support.
Well, thank you very much again for being here for the interview. I definitely love what you're doing. I look forward to seeing more. Once again, everybody, I'm Johnny McCobb, the Creep with the Class. I'm here at Horror News Net TV. Make sure to check out the Before the Mask comic books. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you all next time.
Thanks a lot.